Well, welcome back again this week to another analysis behind the news. You know, politics is really rotten. You know, many times over my lifetime, I've been involved in partisan political politics. Rarely was I just simply a delegate or a precinct committeeman or that sort of thing, but was involved in behind-the-scenes activities that a lot of the people don't know anything about. Most often than not, county delegates, state delegates, and even to a very large extent national delegates have no idea of what's going on behind the scenes to negate their influence and their vote and their choice. Now let me ask you, before we go on, to try and erase any partisanship from your mind. Now you're saying to yourself, yeah, you can do that. Frankly, I don't believe you can. But I'm going to go ahead anyway, because we in the John Birch Society are nonpartisan criticizers of everybody. We don't endorse candidates and that sort of thing, but we try and show some of the things that are going on that you may not be aware of. Back in 1962, some of the biggest critics of the John Birch Society, and particularly Robert Welch, the founder of the society, were Nelson Rockefeller and George Romney. And George Romney, particularly as governor of Michigan, was vociferous in his criticism and lying about the positions of the John Birch Society, to such an extent that in September 1962, Robert Welch had to write a letter, an open letter, to George Romney, which we circulated around the United States, but particularly within the state of Michigan, to point out these inaccuracies and everything else. Subsequent to that, George Romney and Nelson Rockefeller teamed up to slam Barry Goldwater. They did everything they could to prevent him from being nominated at the 1964 Republican National Convention. When they could not prevent it, they did everything they could, particularly George Romney, to scuttle the Goldwater candidacies. There is a lot of circumstantial evidence, but at the time it was pretty well understood that what Nelson Rockefeller did and what George Romney did set the stage for the election of Johnson and the tremendous defeat of Barry Goldwater. Now, it wasn't simply the defeat of Goldwater that was the problem. We can all have our differences. But what it did was create a climate to where the very good conservative, anti-communist constitutionalists who were in Congress and running for Congress were not able to be elected or re-elected, because it was such a lopsided election because of what the establishment, the media, George Romney, and Nelson Rockefeller did to the candidacy of Goldwater, and it destroyed the idea of any victory for the Republican Party, primarily. We could spend a lot of time, a whole hour on this subject alone. But the thing that we see today, happening today, is what I lived in 1964. We're beginning to see Mitt Romney, this time the son of George Romney, coming forward to destroy the candidacy, in this case, of Trump. Now, is Trump a good guy or a bad guy? Quite honestly, I don't know. I do know some of the other candidates that I would never, ever want to vote for. That's for certain. Do I want to vote for Trump? I don't know at this point. But I can tell you this, that what's being done in the Republican Party right now is setting the stage for the defeat of every candidate in the Republican Party and throwing the election to possibly Hillary if she isn't arrested. By the very attitude, by the very shenanigans they did in 1964, they're doing it again today. Now, there are some differences between George Romney and Mitt Romney, at least on the surface. George Romney, for instance, was very active in raising money for the community activist, the leftist, Saul Alinsky. And you can verify that by just, when you get through watching this video, going into your search engine and type in George Romney, Saul Alinsky, and there'll even be photos of them together, and the fact that he was raising money for Saul Alinsky. That's how far to the left that George Romney was. Now, Mitt Romney doesn't appear to be that far to the left, but don't forget, Romneycare was the precursor to Obamacare and things of that nature. And what's happening is this tremendous attack against the supporters of Trump and so forth in such a way, whether Trump's a good guy or a bad guy, the attack is being done in such a way to diminish the success factor of the voter, of all those voters getting out and voting in the final election in November for the really good candidates running for the House of Representatives, running for the Senate of the United States. There are very good men who are running for re-election, for instance, that, you know, they just squeaked through the last election. And they got in there and they've been doing a great job. For as little amount of influence as they have, they've been able to do something at least. We're in jeopardy of losing all of those people because of the machinations of people like Mitt Romney, who just threw the election. The last month that he ran last time, you couldn't find the guy hardly. And it was a very poor campaign, and it threw it to Obama, who arguably could have been defeated in the last election. So here we have a failed candidate coming along now trying to tell everybody what to do. The thing is that there are a lot of problems like this. Kasich, for instance, what he was doing last year was going around in a private jet, landing in various capitals around the Rocky Mountain states, convincing legislators to have a constitutional convention for a balanced budget amendment. Now, it's a funny thing that when he's on the stage in these debates, he never mentions this fact. When the subject comes up of a balanced budget and how would we get a balanced budget, he never ever discusses this on the stage. I have to ask the question, why? If they spent so much money with a private jet to send him around to so many different states to argue for a balanced budget amendment through a constitutional convention, why don't they want the viewers of Fox or CNN or whomever to know that he was part of that process? They don't want the public to know about certain strategies. These are all being done behind the scenes, influencing legislators behind the scenes. Much has been made of the idea that that Trump said that he would look to a person like Richard Hawes, and here he is. He's talking about a guy for his foreign policy positions. Here we're talking about a guy who's president of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is the New World Order bunch. Now, it appeared as though he was just saying that off the top of his head. We do know that Richard Hawes briefed a number of the candidates back in summer of 2015, including Trump, relative to foreign policy. He did this with everybody but Cruz, I guess. But at the same time, Cruz has Council on Foreign Relations members, some very dangerous ones, on his foreign policy committee. So they run through it all. The one thing that we do know is that apparently, and this has been reported in more than one newspaper, that Trump has asked Senator Sessions to put his foreign policy committee together and his national security committee together, which to me is a plus. But nonetheless, we don't know. We do know that some of these candidates are very much involved in the establishment for their expertise and the people on their campaign. And some of them we don't know, and Trump is one of those. But this whole idea of destroying the party with this brouhaha that's going on right now does not bode well for the final election. It's nasty, it's dirty, it has come out front. Usually it's behind the scenes, by the way. This time it's out front. And if this sort of infighting continues, it's going to turn off a lot of voters in November to where they won't show up at the polls. And these will be conservatives, concerned voters who will not vote for these people to be elected or re-elected into the Congress. We've got to kind of divorce ourselves from all of this and be a little bit more gentlemanly. These debates are turning out to be an embarrassment, quite honestly. Actually, they're reminiscent of some of the things that happened in the 1800s. But we'd gotten away from that a little bit in public debates. We're getting back to it again. A lot of people don't like it. I don't like it. I wish they could be more like gentlemen and have a real debate, not these things that are set up by Fox News to get them fighting one another. And if you haven't noticed that that's what Fox News has been doing, then you haven't been paying close attention. Until next week, we'll see you then.